President Sisi discusses ongoing U.S.-Iran negotiations with Pezeshkian. Pezeshkian praises Iran's military after U.S. strikes. And Khamenei says Middle East will no longer shield U.S. military bases. Good morning. You're watching Q News. It is 9 a.m. here in Cairo. Time for our first bulletin. Starting with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who discussed ongoing U.S.-Iran negotiations during a phone call with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. According to the Egyptian presidency, President al-Sisi reaffirmed Egypt's full support for the current negotiation track between Washington and Tehran and reviewed Cairo's diplomatic efforts to help reach a comprehensive agreement that would reduce tensions in the region. President al-Sisi also stressed Egypt's support for peaceful solutions to regional crises and rejected any threats to the sovereignty or territorial integrity of Gulf countries. For his part, President Pezeshkian reviewed the progress of the negotiations and praised Egypt's efforts, while also emphasizing Iran's commitment to strengthening relations with Arab countries, particularly Gulf states. U.S. President Donald Trump said that Iran would portray any surrender in the conflict as a victory over the United States as tensions continue despite ceasefire efforts. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said that Iranian leaders would frame any surrender as what he described as a masterful and brilliant victory over Washington. The remarks came after Iran accused the United States of violating a ceasefire by carrying out strikes near the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran said that the attacks targeted areas in Hormozgan province, while Washington described the strikes as defensive operations against missile sites and mine-laying boats. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that negotiations towards a broader agreement could still take several more days. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said that its air defense forces shot down a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone inside Iranian airspace amid renewed tensions with Washington. The IRGC said that Iranian forces also tracked a U.S. Global Hawk surveillance aircraft and an F-35 fighter jet, claiming both were forced to retreat after warning fire. The Revolutionary Guard warned that Tehran reserves what it described as the legitimate right to respond to any violations of the ceasefire reached with Washington last month. The statement came one day after U.S. Central Command said that American forces carried out strikes on missile launch sites and mine-laying boats in southern Iran. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian praised Iran's military capabilities after the United States carried out strikes in southern Iran. Pezeshkian commended Iran's defensive strength following U.S. strikes in Hormozgan province, which Tehran described as a violation of the ceasefire in place for nearly 7 weeks. Iran's foreign ministry accused Washington of undermining ongoing diplomatic efforts as both sides continue discussing a possible memorandum of understanding aimed at ending the war. The proposed framework would reopen shipping through the Strait of Hormuz while allowing further negotiations on issues including Iran's nuclear program. Iran's Supreme Leader Mujtaba Khamenei said that Middle Eastern countries will no longer serve as shields for U.S. military bases in the region. In a message marking the day of Arafah during the Hajj pilgrimage, Khamenei said that the Middle East and the Muslim world are moving towards what he described as a new regional order. He called on Islamic countries to strengthen cooperation and friendship to address shared challenges and advance the interests of the Muslim world. Khamenei also said that the United States is losing its influence in the region and claimed Israel is nearing what he described as the end of its sinister existence. Iran is demanding the release of billions of dollars in frozen assets as part of ongoing negotiations with the United States aimed at ending the war. Iranian media reported that Tehran is seeking access to $24 billion in frozen assets under a proposed memorandum of understanding being negotiated with Washington. Sources close to the Iranian negotiating team said that Iran wants half the funds released immediately after any agreement is announced, with the remainder transferred within 60 days. The reports added that Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Baqir Qalibaf recently visited Qatar to discuss mechanisms for releasing part of the assets and advancing the broader negotiations. Iranian officials also warned that they remain cautious because of what they describe as previous U.S. failures to fulfill commitments regarding frozen Iranian funds. China said that it is ready to continue playing what it described as a constructive role in efforts to resolve the Iranian nuclear issue through diplomacy. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said that Beijing has maintained close communication with all relevant parties since the outbreak of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. She stressed that China supports resolving the Iranian nuclear issue through dialogue and negotiation, while promoting ceasefire and regional stability. Mao added that Beijing hopes all sides will seize the opportunity to reach a solution addressing the legitimate concerns of all parties and preserving the international nuclear non-proliferation system. Moreover, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi called for continued negotiations between the United States and Iran to help resolve the regional crisis. Speaking after a United Nations Security Council session in New York, Wang Yi said that China has maintained communication with key regional and international parties involved in the conflict. He stressed the importance of respecting sovereignty, protecting civilians, and safeguarding shipping routes and energy infrastructure in the region. Wang described negotiations between Washington and Tehran as a central issue in the crisis and voiced support for mediation efforts led by Pakistan and other countries. And for more analysis, we now go to Mark Summers in our newsroom. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Hannah. Good morning, everyone. We are now joined from Berlin by the former EU Special Representative for Middle East Peace Process and Director of German Orient Institute in Berlin, Dr. Andreas Reinecke. Thank you very much for joining us. Good morning to you. Of course, Europe, where you are, is consistently pushing for diplomacy with Iran. We're having kind of diplomacy. We've had negotiations happening. We've had a potential ceasefire. It's going to be the best ceasefire ever, the end to the war. That didn't happen. Then we've had strikes. Where are we with these negotiations between Washington and Tehran, would you say?
I think despite the public conflicts, I think we are on a relatively good path. What we are seeing now is basically the negotiations for a sort of framework agreement which defines, on the one hand, the topics on which in future negotiations the parties will negotiate. But to reach this framework agreement or the agreement on the agreement, on the topics of the agreement, there are certain preconditions from both sides, and I think that is the issue on which they are discussing. So I think an agreement will be reached maybe a few days. I wouldn't exclude that one or two exchanges of fire, but I don't think that both parties have a real interest in this.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump says military action still remains an option if the talks fail. We had these exchanges this week, which the United States says was defensive. Iran says it was not. These little skirmishes, do you think they're not going to disrail the process?
Yes, this is always possible. It is very delicate, but we've seen that President Trump, who, with his public announcement on social media, tried to influence, on the one hand, the stock exchange worldwide, but on the other hand, he had an influence on the very delicate status of the negotiations. So that's why we have seen these various announcements. But after the first really international uproar on his announcement that Iran would be completely destroyed, I think he understood that this will not be the case. But still, you have to be careful, because one really wrong move from one side might spark again a fight. So I think that's why both sides are a little bit more cautious with their public announcement. I think this is a good sign.
And Iran hasn't really changed its negotiation position since before the war started. I don't think. They're focusing on ending the war, lifting sanctions. They said they would open the Strait of Hormuz, and they don't want to talk about the nuclear issue until a later date. Do you think Trump's going to go for that?
Well, as I said, not speaking on the nuclear issues that on a later date is exactly what I said. They're agreeing, or the idea now is apparently to agree on a framework on what to negotiate later. And I think that makes sense, because the issues are so complex that to believe that these can be resolved within a few days is quite unrealistic. So you need to have a framework idea on what to negotiate, and then they seem to agree to negotiate on the nuclear file one way or the other. So I think that is correct. And the other issues we will have to observe. I think we have to make distinctions between the public announcements, which are obviously very important, and that was really happening at the negotiation table. Public announcements are always part of the negotiation tactics. I'm not quite sure on the US side at this moment, but I think we have to see what's really discussed on the table, and this we will only see once a deal is out.
And of course, when the negotiations began, it did seem that they were very impatient. When J.D. Vance went to Islamabad, it seemed like Trump was expecting an end to all that within 24 hours. And then it was, if you don't agree to this by Wednesday, will destroy the civilization. And then it was Friday, then there'll be a golden glow. But he seems to have changed his tune, President Trump, and now he's saying he's not in a rush. Do you see a change in him, and that he realizes now this is going to take months?
Yes, I do think so. And I think everybody knew this, or should have known, but maybe the American negotiators, Kushner and Witkoff, were more in a real estate deal rather than in a political deal. Vance probably different, and I think that's what happened then, that they realized it's not possible. Everybody, also on the American side, we have extremely skilled and capable negotiators, obviously, but they seem not to be involved in that in the first part. Now they seem to be more professional, and I think we are moving in this sort of realistic negotiations. If you remember that the European brokered negotiation on the joint plan of action, the JCPOA, took years to negotiate. You can build on this, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So it can be much faster this time, but still it takes time to agree on the various issues.
Yes, I was about to mention exactly what you said there. The Obama era deal, the JCPOA, did take years. Many critics in the United States are now saying that this new deal that Trump has got is probably going to be worse than the Obama and Europe deal that Trump ripped up in his first term, perhaps because now the Strait of Hormuz has become the central part of this crisis. How concerned is Europe about the impact on global energy when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz?
Yes, of course. It is not only Europe, it's the Arab world even more. because they need to export oil, gas, and liquid gas, and etc., all the products, at least those which are produced in the Gulf. But obviously Europe, Asia, and everybody is concerned because of the price hikes. So we all have an interest that the war ends and that the Strait of Hormuz is a free street, so that there are not additional costs imposed on it. If you have additional costs on the various ships, then obviously on the midterm perspective, parties look to try to see how to circumvent it. So I think there is a real issue on this. The negotiators know this on both sides, and let's wait and see what will be the outcome.
And regional players here, of course, have been especially heavily involved. Pakistan, of course, in mediation efforts. What does this look like from Europe's view, and especially Germany, where you are? How involved have European countries like Germany and the E3, France and Britain, been involved behind the scenes, perhaps, in these kind of negotiations?
No, at this particular moment, as far as I know, the European countries are not directly involved in these sort of negotiations, and that's fine. I mean, as long as both sides agree on a great mediator, and apparently they agreed on Pakistan, this is good. And obviously Pakistan is not acting on its own. You have Egypt, you have Turkey, and you have Saudi Arabia also supporting these negotiations, and I think that's very good. Europe led the first JCPOA negotiations. It was Solana who was at the beginning of the 2000 flew to Tehran, said, look, let's sit down. The other Europeans, you just mentioned, Europe, Germany, France, and UK joined, and then later on the US at the same time. Obviously, the US are the crucial partner because they have the sanctions against Iran, and they need to be lifted. But I think Europe played a role. Europe will play a role maybe on the situation in the Gulf of Hormuz. You remember that France and UK called for the conference in Paris on a potential participation of European countries in keeping the Strait of Hormuz free. What exactly this will mean, and this will be optional, another one, we don't know yet, but it clearly shows the interest of Europe, and Germany is included, by the way, and also the willingness of Europe to help to keep the Strait of Hormuz free, and also to continue with the diplomatic process in the region.
And of course, the elephant in the room, I guess, in our conversation so far is Israel. And Israel continues to insist that any final agreement must have the complete dismantlement of nuclear capabilities entirely. So that means no enrichment at all, not even for peaceful energy purposes. Do you think their position is going to hold? But also, it's been reported this morning that Ben Gvir in Israel has been saying that Israel will not allow the United States to make a deal with Iran.
Well, that's two different things. I mean, that Israel wants the Iranian nuclear capabilities to be dismantled is something which we know since a long time. I would say it has to be clear that Iran has no nuclear weapon. And this is a process to which Iran, in principle, has already agreed at various occasions. I think the President Pezeshkian has repeated it as an idea, or even at this time. But the question is how to reach that. Iran has always said, by the way, also through the times of the Shah already, that they want the nuclear capabilities for their own energy consumption. So let's wait and see what this will mean.
But when it comes to Israel, are they trying to sabotage any deal, do you think? Because they keep moving the goalposts. Of course, last year we saw them take out the negotiators, and they keep pushing the United States to aggression when any deal looks likely. What's your position?
They might do this, but I don't think the US will allow them in the end. And I don't think it's in the interest of Israel. Now, what Israel tries, or what Iran actually tries to see, that there is a link between the Lebanon file, Hezbollah, and Iran, and US, Iran, and I think also we suggest that this should be treated separately. Now, Hezbollah, as we know, has refused the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, Israel and Lebanon, and has not agreed to it, has even called even against the Lebanese government to have negotiations. So they clearly are not willing to calm down. And that gives Israel the pretext now to hit even harder against Lebanon, destroying a lot of things and maybe even pursuing also part of a much more aggressive strategy from the part of Ben Gurion and others. So Hezbollah is playing not a good game. They help the Israeli radicals. So let's see how this will work out. But I think if we have a deal between the United States and Iran, I think Israel has no option to stop it, and also Hezbollah has to accept. And let's see whether this will work out.
The ceasefires in Lebanon haven't really worked out very well in the last couple of years. But let's come to that then, because we were talking about Iran, of course, and the Strait of Hormuz and activities there. But simultaneously, we have problems again in Gaza in the last few days. They've never really stopped, perhaps just reduced. And Lebanon, of course, facing much, much hardship, perhaps 2 million people displaced in Lebanon and Israel. Moving further into the country to, as they say, take out Hezbollah chiefs. Iran are going to insist on Lebanon being part of any deal, I would imagine. Do you think the Israelis are ever going to accept that?
Well, I think what is in the interest of Israel and Lebanon, I think they are really the state of Lebanon, not necessarily Hezbollah, is to stop the fighting on both sides. And don't forget the difficult attacks of Israel on Lebanon. South Lebanon are extremely hard, but Hezbollah attacked Israel also. In particular, this time there was a ceasefire, and following the Israel attack on Iran and Israel-US attack, Hezbollah answered. So I think here Israel clearly has the right to defend itself. The question is it how to do it? And the present brutal attacks are certainly not helpful to reach this end. I think this we have to explain. So the question is how to come to an agreement and how to reduce the influence of Hezbollah. And Iran wants to make sure that they have the upper hand, and Israelis and also Lebanese, the US would like to say, no, Iran, you don't have the upper hand on Hezbollah, and that's where the current fight is all about. So let's see how this will work out.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, though, isn't it? Because you say that Israel has the right to defend itself, but it does seem, Hezbollah sends a rocket in the middle of nowhere, and Israel razes several villages to the ground, displacing 2 million people. There's sometimes a difference in emphasis and what's happening on both sides. But let's come to the European perspective. What do you think would be a suitable long-term solution with Iran, with Israel, with the United States that Europe would think would be a good outcome?
Ambassador, I would like to come back to your remark.
Yeah, of course.
As I said, Israel has a right to self-defense, but I also said that it is going beyond, and that's what is really needed. That's why I said Hezbollah is playing a dangerous game, because doing so, it allows the radicals on the Israeli side to do what you have just said. So if Hezbollah had really an interest, they would stop. Because it gives this pretext. So obviously, Israel doesn't need to have this pretext. I mean, they would like to have this pretext, so the fault is on both sides. But come to on your question concerning what is needed, where we would go. I think we are in a reorganization of the region altogether. And if you see how difficult it is to negotiate with Israel and with Iran and how the various conflicts are, I think we should move towards a direction of a regional security arrangement, which includes Iran, which includes the Arab state, and which includes Israel. Obviously, the precondition is that the Palestinian file is closed, and that they find an agreement on the Palestinian side, which will not reduce all the other issues, but it's the basic part, because it prevents from radicals from abusing the Palestinians or the Palestinian file for attacks against Israel. So I think the Palestinian file, the Palestinian issue is key, but it's not the only one. And I'm not sure that we are moving already towards a system of regional stability. This will probably take years to go there, because also both parties or all parties have to realize that this is the best way. But this is a path which would help the Arab states, which would help Egypt, which would maybe also help on the Sudanese side, and also Lebanon, Israel, and Iran. Again, you need to have all parties to be convinced of that that's for them the best way. We are not yet, but hopefully we are moving towards this situation, which obviously would require very complex and complicated negotiations.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to have your input, Dr. Andreas Reinecke, former EU Special Representative for the Middle East Peace Process and Director of the German Orient Institute in Berlin. It's been a pleasure to have you on here with us on Q News. And now let's go back to Hella in the studio.
Thank you so much, Mark, for the thorough analysis. And while diplomacy over Iran remains fragile, the fallout is continuing to spread across the region, especially in Lebanon, where clashes between Israel and Hezbollah are intensifying once again.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Smoke rose over southern Lebanon following a new wave of Israeli strikes as clashes with Hezbollah continue despite a ceasefire. Lebanon State News Agency reported multiple Israeli strikes across southern areas, sending large plumes of smoke into the sky. Fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has continued despite a ceasefire announced in April, with both sides accusing each other of repeated violations. Israel claims that its operations target security threats in southern Lebanon, while Hezbollah continues launching attacks on northern Israel and Israeli military positions. Israel has begun mobilizing reservists and expanding military preparations along the Lebanese border amid escalating tensions with Hezbollah. Israeli media reported that the Israeli military has issued emergency call-up orders to reservists as operations expand beyond a buffer zone established near southern Lebanon. Recently discharged soldiers were reportedly ordered to immediately return to active reserve duty. Meanwhile, the Israeli military issued evacuation warnings for residents of the southern Lebanese city of Nabatiyah ahead of planned strikes, urging civilians to move north of the Zahrani River. Israeli military spokesperson Avichai Adra'i warned that anyone near Hezbollah positions or facilities would be placing their lives in danger. Meanwhile, the Israeli military released footage that it claimed showed strikes on Hezbollah targets on southern Lebanon as Israel intensified its operations across the country. The video released by the Israeli military showed aerial views of strikes targeting what it described as Hezbollah positions, including a building allegedly used by a Hezbollah operative. Lebanese security sources said Israel carried out more than 120 airstrikes on late Tuesday, marking one of the heaviest bombardments in recent weeks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel is intensifying military operations in Lebanon and reinforcing its border security zone. Speaking at the opening of a security cabinet meeting in Jerusalem, Netanyahu said that Israeli forces are strengthening what he described as a security buffer zone to protect communities in northern Israel. Well, that's all for now, but before we go, let's take a quick look at the top headlines making news this hour. President Sisi discusses ongoing U.S.-Iran negotiations with Pezeshkian. Pezeshkian praises Iran's military after U.S. strikes. And Khamenei says Middle East will no longer shield U.S. military bases. Well, that brings us to the end of this bulletin. Thank you so much for watching Q News, your window to the latest developments from across the region and around the world. I'm Hela Al-Hamalawi. Stay tuned to Q News.